I am very pleased and very happy and very grateful to introduce our keynote speaker, Dennis Kucinic.
Thank you, John. Hello, Wausau, Wisconsin. Great to be here with you. Nice to be among all these troublemakers, activists, rabble-rousers, change makers. You're not paid to be here. I'm not paid either. We're together. Thank you for the invitation to be here, and thank you for the opportunity to come here on this beautiful autumn afternoon to share some thoughts about the nature of activism and why we do what we do, which is to change the world. There is no purpose in taking the energy that we have from within us and going out there day after day after day, committed to change, unless it's our intention to change the world. Now, as someone who began this journey many years ago, I've learned many things. And one of the first things that I learned is that what is innermost, what's inside of us, inevitably becomes outermost. If we want to change the world, we first have to tap that potential within ourselves for change. And that's an evolutionary process. It doesn't happen overnight. It's easy to stand on stages around the world and to talk about how this has to change and that has to change and stop this, start that. But it's much more difficult to look inside oneself and find out what can we do to be appropriate agents, to be individuals who can use the power of our own imagination, the power of our own spirits, to bring about the evolutionary potential of ourselves. And then when we are able to do that, the spiritual power of that infuses everything we touch. Because there is a connection between spirit and matter, between the material world and the spiritual world. And when we want to change things in the material world, the human spirit has to be projected into that activity. Otherwise, it's devoid. It doesn't mean anything. Because we're more than this physical self. What propels us along is this, in this desire to change things, is the sense of the primacy of the human spirit and infusing that human spirit into events to bring about transformation. Now, I started at a community level in the city of Cleveland. I started exercising these thoughts about the mechanics of change, the physics of change, if you will, by being involved as a young councilman, saving city parks, being involved in campaigns for to stop the closing of a library in one case, to build a library in another, to stop the closing of a firehouse in one place, to help build a firehouse in another. And what I found out in each case is that if we're able to give of ourselves wholly and relentlessly, if we if we don't quit, if we understand that defeat and victory are just opposite sides of that coin of involvement that happens. You know, we win, we lose. It doesn't matter. It's our commitments that are enduring. And if we understand when we build this common unity, which we call community, the power that comes from that, we know and we experience the dynamic of what happens when we're one. In this moment right now, we have a unified field. We're one. We're thinking not just about my words, but we're thinking about our own experience, about where we've been, about what we want to do, about what it is that we'd like to apply ourselves to or are applying ourselves to. My experience has been that on matters small and large, the physics of change are the same, that we have to be able to envision the world that we want. And let me give you an example. Okay, this is a wall, but it's also on a subatomic level. It's in motion. This wall is in motion, but the particles are held together. We have a wall. But what happens when you see a wall, some solid mass of what might look like objective reality, and we're told that's it, it's a wall. But what if you look at that wall and you see another reality there? You just see it. You envision something different. The physics of change involve envisioning another reality, and actually, in quantum physics, there's a fellow by the name of David Bohm, who's a very famous physicist, and he talks about what's called the implicate order. In other words, is what you see, but then there's something behind that. The space in between the spaces on a subatomic level are called gluon. They're particles that hold the reality together, but there's another reality there. In every moment, in every challenge we see, in every circumstance we're in every situation that we want to change, let me tell you, there is another reality within there. We might look at it and say, that's a wall. No, there's another reality. You have to envision it, and when you see it, you call it forward and you send it into motion. I have time and time again seen circumstances where people say, you can't do anything about that. You can't change that. You can't stop that. The deal's cut, forget it. And over again, through applying principles of creative envisioning, through understanding that multiple realities exist simultaneously, to being able to pick the reality that you want and make it and create it, recreate it. That's the power of being an activist.
Hell yeah.
That's where we have, through heart infused with spirit, through intellect guided by aspirations, that's where we create new worlds. What you as activists do is holy. It is sacred. It is touching the world in a way that says that, we can heal it, we can calm it, we can elevate it, we can transform it. That's what we believe. And it's not about labels, political parties, that level of politics, forget about it. That's so limiting. It's not about polarities, because polarized thinking, and this is one of the problems of our time today, polarized thinking, the us versus them, whoever they are, is a precursor to war. So we're basically guided to turn on each other as human beings. To turn on each other through social, racial, or partisan divisions. And it's all stupid, because it doesn't really describe who we are. It limits the expression of our humanity. It limits the power of our activism. If we come to a situation we figure, I can't talk to them, they're this party or that party. No, 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 no. We're all one. We're interconnected. We are interdependent. Human unity is the first truth. Human unity is the precondition that we move into. And so we need to always look for that underlying unity. It does exist. I traveled America for years in the 2004 campaign and the 2008 campaign, and I had a chance to see America in a way that few people have had the opportunity. In meetings like this all over the country. And there is an underlying unity in this country. You wouldn't know it, though, because our politics, the words of leaders, seek to divide us, to put us into warring camps, and then we're left struggling at some level with this idea that we suffer from irreconcilable differences. We do not. So it's up to each of us to be able to take that journey to find the unity within and express it outwardly, to find in every challenge the points where we might get involved and start to tease apart a question and say, this is where we can enter into it and take the series of steps that must be taken to go from something that seems irredeemably, abstractly unchangeable to something that suddenly, somebody says a miracle has occurred. Well, let me tell you, the miracles are inside of us waiting to unfold. They're inside of us waiting to be unlocked. I know this from my experience. When it was 40 years ago that I began a campaign for mayor of the city of Cleveland on a commitment to save the city's municipal electric system from sale to a private utility, and the system had already been sold. It was sold. My closest advisor was saying, Dennis, what part of sold don't you understand? It's done, it's over. I sat at the top of my steps on Milan Avenue in Cleveland, little colonial bungalow that we still have today. And it was like midnight. And I was really meditating on this condition of people having their little electric system that provided savings on electricity and had been around for 70 years. All of a sudden it's going to be taken over, and the mayor and the council had gone along with it, and the media had gone along with it, and all the organizations in town had gone along with it. The business community was beating the drum for it. And it was little old me. How preposterous it was. I mean, really. That somebody who was, yes, had been in politics a few years already, but that somebody who was coming from a neighborhood in the city could have the temerity to think that he was going to reverse a decision that had already been made. So I sat at the top of the stairs and I meditated. I actually thought, well, what can I do? And it just kind of, and every one of us has this moment where you think about what you can do about a situation, it just kind of starts to come to you. And I put it down on paper. Here's the steps we need to take. And one thing after another. Actually, the physics of change has its architecture. You have to have structure. You have to have form. And so I laid it out. I laid out a campaign and started it, put it in motion. And suddenly, things started to open up that people thought were irreversible. And that set me on a campaign that really resulted in me being elected mayor of the city of Cleveland at the age of 30, 40 years ago. So we saved the electric system. I was elected mayor, canceled the sale, and then I found out more about my community. But I thought I knew where City Hall was. What I didn't know is that City Hall was in the boardrooms of the banks and utilities and the newspaper editors' offices, and you know that was what they believed was the real City Hall. And I thought I knew where City Hall was, and I had the audacity to believe that I was actually the mayor. But let me tell you, I was the product of the aspirations of the people to not just save an electric system, but to take the city in a new direction. On December 15th, 1978, the biggest bank in the state of Ohio came to me and said, Dennis, you're going to sell that electric system because if you don't, we, the bank, will not renew the city's credit on loans I hadn't even taken out. I was being blackmailed. I said no. They put the city into default. We found out later the bank was a business partner of the utility, owned utility stock. But then we came back again and created another campaign. We were told that 95% of the people wanted our municipal utility sold, since they thought, well, that's why the city of Cleveland went into default. But we had an election 3 months later on the question, and 95% against Muni Light turned out to be 66% in favor of Muni Light. How in the heck does that happen? The miracles that we worked in Cleveland, just on the issue of an electric system, were symbolic or a testament to the miracles that reside in every community. But they need us to happen. So today, that little utility is I think it's in 114th year. Still around, and so am I. But I'm not in my 114th year. I mention this because I have seen over and over again people saying you can't do it. We had a steel mill that was closed. We reversed the situation and saved 3,000 jobs. We had a railroad that was going to run 48 trains a day through residential communities. It's been a nightmare for people in the western part of Cleveland. We did something that no one's ever done. We beat the railroads at the Surface Transportation Board. In 1999, President Clinton was looking for authorization from Congress to authorize a continuation of an air war against Serbia. Quietly, I organized Democrats to work with Republicans, and when they called the vote, it was like watching a basketball game, a high-scoring game. It was 211 to 211, 213 in favor of the resolution or the war, 212 against, and we were losing by one vote when the gavel dropped. I remember I talked about looking at a wall and calling forth another reality. Here's how that worked on this vote. There's a convention in the House of Representatives that when members vote, some will come in late. And if they're coming in late, as a courtesy, unless the vote is finally gavelled, the person's given a chance to vote. But the way you do that is that somebody calls out to look down the hall, and they'll go like this, and somebody will call out, one more. So the gavel was dropping. I stood at the back of the House of Representatives. I looked out the door, and I shouted, one more. I'm going like this. The chair waited a couple minutes. People are milling around in the House. There's an undercurrent of disorganization and chaos as the vote is going on. And then again, the gavel falls. The vote's about to be called. we're losing by 1 vote. I stand near the door and I call out, one more, one more. Of course, there was no one there. The Democratic leader figured out what I was doing and actually shoved me. I mean, gave me a shove that was worthy of an NFL player. This is not a game. At that exact moment, the gavel finally fell. Out of nowhere, a vote materialized. Out of nowhere. Making it a tie. A tie meant that the vote failed. We won. We stopped the continuation of the war against Serbia that way. So let me tell you, I know, and that may be, by the way, that may be the only time that a president has been denied a vote to keep a war going, and we had it happen one more time with respect to Libya, and we tied up the capital and NATO and the world for a couple of days when we put together another coalition to stop that war in its tracks. But then it was able to proceed. But see, I mention this because even when you talk about things that appear as intractable as a war, by entering in at the right moment, by having the presence of mind about what's going on, you can change things. Now, I'd like to address something that's been on all of our minds in the last few days, and that is the events in Las Vegas. Can I ask you before I start, can I ask you what time it is right now? That's 2:45? 2:45, great, we're good. Every one of us, I know I can speak for all of us because wherever I've been in the last few days, people are talking about it and their hearts sick. All of us were there. Not just 20,000 people. But because time is an illusion, we were all there at the moment that those bullets rained down on people cutting short their lives, altering forever their families, their communities. And we're still there. And we're in Newtown still. We're still there. Those were our children. We're being asked in some cryptic way to accept the inevitability of violence in our society. There's nothing we can do about it. That's what we're told. There's nothing we can do about it. It's just the way it is. On July the 11th, 2001, I brought, after thinking about the experience that I had in challenging the war against Serbia, and thinking about how men and women were usually very placid and community spirited, would get into the Democratic caucus and come out for war when they were otherwise peaceful people. And I wonder, how the heck does this happen? How do we get pulled into wars? And I did some research and I found out that in the 20th century, over 100 million people perished in wars, most of them innocent, non-combatant civilians. 100 million more. And then I thought, as I started to study it, I thought about what is underneath war. What's that impulse towards violence? And I went back into thinking about an experience that all of us have had, or we know somebody who's had it. Look at the evidence of domestic violence that exists. We know about it. And when I speak of it, we must consider it compassionately because it touches so many people we know. Spousal abuse, child abuse, people, mostly adults in this room. Some of you know about child abuse. Some of you have experienced it years ago. And then we have violence in the schools, gang violence, gun violence, racial violence, violence against gays. I was thinking of all these symptomatologies of violence in a society that appears to be unhinged. And we're told, well, that's the way it is. Violence, American, is apple pie. Well, wait a minute. The poet, the essayist, Emerson, once wrote, "Every jet of chaos which threatens to exterminate us is convertible by intellect into wholesome force." Every jet of chaos which threatens to exterminate us is convertible by intellect into a wholesome force. In other words, we have the power through our intellect to be able to apply it in every situation and use that to change things. So I was thinking about the matter of violence, and it occurred to me that if we, first of all, look within ourselves about these impulses. I mean, you want to take a lesson in practicing nonviolence, drive in heavy traffic at rush hour in a big city. You know what I'm talking about. But yet, because we're tested. Or be, parents in a big family. We actually every day have a chance. In every relationship we're in, we have a chance to practice peace or not. To escalate a discussion or not. Now, we think it may not matter how we approach these situations, but it always matters. Because violence that happens in a microcosm, even within our own lives, is writ large. Why are we teetering on the edge of a nuclear conflagration right now? Is it simply because we have some leaders who are unhinged? No. It's because we have a nation that needs to address the underlying cause of violence in our society. And when we're able to do that, we free ourselves of this chain of violence which tethers us to an existence of fear and of want and of a belief in the inevitability of our own demise. No, we don't have to be there. But we need to use our intellect and our resources to start to create programs to deal directly with the issues of violence in our own society on a day-to-day basis, to teach children that you never hit another person, to teach it from an early age, to have an organized approach in doing it. We need to do it compassionately. This isn't about blaming anyone. We all have these beasts that we have to struggle with from time to time and tame. Every one of us deals with feelings that we don't necessarily know what to do with at a moment, but we get help. And it's a moral imperative, it's a spiritual imperative, it's a cultural imperative. But we need to, as a country, address this issue of violence in an organized way. You can get rid of all the guns in America, and that would be quite a task, since there's a few 100 million of them. And we're still not going to solve the issue of violence. And I'm somebody who probably, would be the least favorite person of the NRA. Because I have a pretty much 100% voting record that deals with trying to get rid of guns. Now, I don't own guns, but you know what? I'm telling you, the nation right now is locked into, once again, the debate over guns, and we're looking in the wrong place. We're looking in the wrong place. We need to address the underlying issues of violence in our society, and we need to address the underlying issue of the mental health of our society. Life is tough on people. Most healthcare plans have very minimal support for people who have mental difficulties. And who doesn't at one time or another struggle? And so we pretend that, oh, no, it's not me, it's somebody else. No, wait a minute. We need to have compassion for each other. And we need to recognize that we have a society that has potential for unlimited possibilities, for more freedom, for less suffering, for better health. But we have to start paying attention to how we get there. This is one of the reasons why I've been for a universal, single-payer, not-for-profit healthcare system. I wrote the bill 15 years ago with John Conyers, and mental health is a key part of it. You know, medicine is also, it's not just the body, it's the mind as well. And so we need to have a comprehensive approach to dealing with violence and to mental health challenges that people face. And to do it without blaming anybody and say, look, this is time for us to do it. This is a moment to do it. What happened in Las Vegas is still another warning of what happens when we do not resolve it. And again, I don't want to see this country locked into what is really a debate that we can never resolve, at least not right away. We need to address something beneath it. See, I think that peace in the world is possible. I think the U.S. needs to take a different position in the world. I had the honor a week ago to speak to the United Nations about nuclear disarmament and nuclear abolition. And yesterday, the ICANN organization, an international organization people work on nuclear abolition, won the Nobel Peace Prize. That's a sign of the direction we can go in. But at the same time, people in Washington are pushing to cancel an agreement we have with Iran. That would mean more proliferation. So we have this dynamic balance going on right now. In a way, that's the fate of the earth. It's in balance. What side do we weigh in on? When we tame the impulse towards violence, we help to free the earth, and we help to permit the unfolding of this great destiny of peoples on a planet to elevate the human condition. Or, through miscalculation, the human condition could just be nullified. I'm an optimistic person. My activism informs me to be an optimist. If you're an activist, you cannot be a pessimist. You cannot, because that's poison to activism. You have to have impossible optimism. You have to, in the words of the poet Shelley, defy power which seems omnipotent. What do they say? This is what makes us free. This is glorious. And so, I'm so happy to be here, because I'm surrounded by people. This is where I came from. This is the kind of place where I dwell, in a place of possibility, in a place of change, in a place of creating a new world. And it's not too late. It's not too late. So let's do it. Thank you very much. Thank you. Yes, I do have time for questions. I got 10 minutes.
Can I make a statement? Sure. Thank you, Mr. Kucinic. We would like you, before you leave, to have time to look at the cakes we got for you, and to...
I'm sorry to ask, are they vegan? No, listen. I would like to share to everyone here to share the cake on my behalf and on behalf of everyone else who's celebrating. 22 years ago, I became a vegan. Now, it's not a religion. It's not a religion, but it's kind of the way I live. And so, but thank you for your thoughtfulness. I love you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
Okay, Dennis, we understand that it's your birthday tomorrow.
It is.
And so a lot of people want to wish you a happy birthday, and here's all the birthday cards that everybody signed.
Thank you.
Can you get the Brandon to stand and join and start us in a song of happy birthday?
I could start us in a song of happy birthday.
Everybody, ready?
Come on, ready? Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday, dear Dennis. Happy birthday to you.
I love you. Thank you.
Okay, I want to use the prerogative of the chair here to ask Dennis a question, and it may be a question on a number of your minds. First, I'm going to ask you a question. How many of you would characterize yourself as spiritual? Okay. That's what I anticipated. So here's my question, Dennis. How would you suggest, conventionally in the past, that tended to revolve around a religious configuration. And we now have realized that we're in a different place than just that. So how would you suggest that human beings get in touch with the spiritual dimension of their persona?
Well, I can share my experience. I respect all religions. I've studied most of them carefully. Spirit includes religions, but it goes beyond it. It connects with all possibilities. It connects with all people. It connects with believers and non-believers. It connects with the world and the air and the water and the environment. I'll tell you a story. My daughter, who is now a pretty well-known news person, when Jackie was growing up, she was 5 years old, and I took her to church on a Sunday. And after we left the church, she started crying. I don't want to do this anymore. She says, it's just stupid. 5 years old, right? Now, how do you argue with a kid who says you're not going to do this? So what we did on Sundays, we started to go out to parks and talk about the spirit of the land, the spirit of the water, the spirit of the sky. Suddenly, this idea of spirit became a little bit different. It wasn't like about a building. It wasn't just one person who was the agent of that. It was about everything. For me, I don't get up in the morning. I can't get started in the morning if I don't have some resonance with that spiritual part of my existence. And I'm not talking about religion. A little bit different, because I don't promote religion. As people want to. I'm not a.
You're not proselytizing.
That's right. I was going to say that word. It's amazing how you could get, everyone in this room could give this speech. I thank you. But let's face it, there are principles, there are moral and ethical principles that we live by. And they help support the continuation of life on the planet. And it's not just about telling people what they can't do, it's about unlocking human potential and looking at what we can do. I mean, I believe in prayer. I believe in the power of prayer. I think there's a large kind of consciousness out there that some people call God. I'm guided by that. I'm paying attention to it all the time. Do I think that I have any wisdom that's received that's superior to anybody else in this room? Absolutely not. We all have access to that kind of higher understanding. But it's important to be humble about reaching for spiritual evolvement because we're all on that path, or not. It's like, and so to me, everything I do has to have a spiritual dimension. And if some other people don't believe it, you accept that too. Because again, it's not about polarization, it's about unification. Next question. Yes.
Foxconn is our wall in Wisconsin that our state has been sold. And I just want to say thank you very much for your inspirational speech, because I'm going to take that and we're going to un-Foxconn our state with that encouragement. But have you been following that, and do you have any advice? Because we're all novices here and we need to get rid of that corporation.
I'd be happy to have a follow-up discussion with you about it so that we could, okay, there you go. So, we'll set up a call so we can go over it, because yes, I do know about it, but I think it'd be good if we just had a discussion, because it's not about me, it's about what the community wants to do, and I'd like to, I can share with you some of my experiences. Next question. Yes, sir.
Congress is pushing to get our government to spend something like $1 trillion to, it's called upgrade the nuclear arsenal, which will apparently destroy existing non-proliferation agreements with the world. How does that compare to what North Korea is doing and what happened in Las Vegas?
Well, look, North Korea has 5, 6 nuclear weapons, we're told, and the U.S. has thousands and thousands, and we are building, as you say, $1 trillion for new nuclear architecture, nuclear weapon architecture. So that means we're going to have more nuclear weapons. We're going in the opposite direction. America, because of that, is interestingly and perfectly poised to lead the way for abolition. Follow that now. If we're the greatest proliferator, then we should be we can flip that to become the greatest at elimination of nuclear weapons. But what does it take? It takes the will of the people and an understanding that America's role in the world must change. It must change. Look, I'm from the streets of Cleveland, Ohio. I grew up the oldest of 7. My parents never owned a home. As the family grew to 7 kids, we lived in about 21 different places by the time I was 17, including a couple cars. My understanding of human existence is very basic. Food, shelter, jobs, healthcare, security, education, people. This is what these are the common human aspirations that we all have. But when you get into this idea of domination, of control, what's that about? Why in the world does the United States have over 800 bases in 130 countries? Why? What's the point of that? Why are we spending $1 trillion a year on wars, $700 billion of it for keeping this vast military infrastructure all over the world? Why? Why can't we have a nation where every person has a chance for a college education, where no one has to worry about going broke because they're ill, where everyone has an opportunity to have a roof over their head? Why can't we have that kind of country? Why do we have to live in fear? See, this is the kind of, I've led it was 15 years ago, I led the effort against the war in Iraq, and I have to tell you something. I knew back then, people were saying, well, if I'd have known then what I know now. No, people knew then. They knew it. They knew we were waging a war based on lies. We're keeping up this nuclear infrastructure based on lies. We're keeping up a military presence all over the world based on lies. The world's changed. It's interconnected. It's interdependent. We're all one. Why are we prosecuting wars? Yes, we need to have some global force where we all come together to stop the people who want to wage war or control people or run a country into a ground or deny people food or water or whatever. Yes, there needs to be that. That's what the UN is about. But no nation should ever be in a position of trying to control all the other nations. How can we afford that? I want to know. We can't afford it anymore. We have to start taking care of our own here. Defend America, absolutely. My dad fought in World War II. My brother in the Iraq War. I would have been or in the Vietnam War. I'd have been there if I'd had a heart murmur. Our family's a military family, but I will tell you something. We have to stop identifying this country with war. We have to start identifying it with peace. And we have to demand, as activists and as people, that America work on diplomacy. That we fulfill the prophecy of nation not taking up arms against nations, of beating our swords into plowshares, our spears into pruning hooks, of nation, coming together. That's not some airy-fairy notion. That's ultimately what we're promised if we believe in human unity. If we believe that we can be better than we are and more than we are, we're not bound to this endless chain of war. I reject that notion, and we have to challenge leaders who believe in war. We have to challenge them. We have to challenge their thinking. We have to challenge their rationale. We have to challenge their budget. We have to challenge those who support war. We have to change those who are irredeemably in favor of war. We have to recognize the capacity our country has goes beyond just our weapons. It goes to our idea, our ingenuity, our creativity, our ability to make things that the world never even dreamed of. That's what it means to be an American. It doesn't mean just that we have the ability to win any war. We have to change this. It's about time we begin, too, I'll tell you. Okay, I've just been told I've got time for 2 more questions. Yes.
Hi, thank you for being here. I just wanted to ask you, what advice do you have for a newly elected local official to be the best public servant possible for the people they represent?
Don't be afraid. And when you're newly elected, you have just as much of a right to speak out as anybody who's been around in that office forever. You're equal to everyone that's serving. And when interest groups come in and they say, this is what we must have, if it's not for the community, it's okay to say no. As a matter of fact, it's preferable to say no. Yes?
Dennis, is the NEED Act dead, or is it merely hibernating in committee?
Well, the NEED is the National Employment Emergency Defense Act. I wrote it and introduced in 2010 after 5 years of research. And what it's about is this. In 1913, the Federal Reserve was created. And before the creation of the Federal Reserve, the federal government had the power under Article 1, Section 8 to coin or create money. That was the power of the government. In 1913, and there's a book about it, I think it's called The Creature from Jekyll Island, and it's how the bankers came together at Jekyll Island, Georgia, and they created this Federal Reserve, and the Federal Reserve privatized the money supply. Before that, the government could issue money to meet the needs of the country, but after that, in order to meet the needs of the country, the government had to borrow money from the banks. The same year the Fed was created, the federal income tax was created. Same year, 1913, right behind that, which guaranteed that the government would be able to pay off the banks with the money from the country. So this privatization of the money supply had dramatic implications for all of us, because it meant that money equaled debt. It took me a long time to figure that out, what that meant. But it meant that you can't bring any money into being unless you create more debt. And banks had another power. It's called, when you borrow $100 from a bank, they can create $900. It's called fractional reserve banking. They can just make an entry in a book and create $900 and loan it out. So the more money people borrow, the banks grow geometrically. The Federal Reserve has the power of what's called quantitative easing. They create money out of nothing, and they give it to other banks. That's what they did during the subprime meltdown. Congress gave the banks hundreds of billions. The Fed created trillions of dollars to help support the speculation of banks that was going on everywhere. So with that in the background, I talked to a fellow by the name of Stephen Zarlenga, who just, God rest his soul, just passed away. And Stephen Zarlenga, on May the 4th, 2005, walked into my office, and he presented me with his ideas about monetary policy, and my life changed that day. Not only because he introduced me to monetary policy, but also because walking in the office with him was his assistant, who had just taken a job with him, and she had come from London to take a job with him. And when she walked in the room, our eyes met, and let me tell you, it was all over. And she, now Elizabeth and I have been married 12 years, but I met my wife through this monetary policy. I'm almost done. Thank you. So so I introduced what's called the National Employment Emergency Defense Act, and here's what it does. It changes the role of the Federal Reserve, puts it as a bureau under Treasury, reclaims for the government the power to be able to spend money into circulation to meet the needs of the country. We can create full employment. We can pay for health care for all. We can pay for education for all. We don't have to borrow money from banks. Banks will still be able to go into business, but they can't use fractional reserve banking. It'll be basically, one-to-one transactions like any other business, and not create things out of nothing. And the NEED Act actually reclaims the government's ability as a sovereign power to be able to meet the needs of the people. Now, the question comes, what about inflation? If inflation's a threat, you use taxation to cool off an overheating economy. We should not have the levels of taxation we have today. We just shouldn't. Except, we have war and debt. That's what we're left with. But anyhow, this subject, the NEED Act, if you go to the web and you type in Kucinic NEED Act, you'll read about the underlying philosophy. But here's an example of, think you can't do anything about it? Oh no, this is coming. We can reclaim our destiny as a nation. But right now, where do our taxes go? It goes for war, it goes to pay off debt, it goes to make a few people wealthy at the expense of all of us. I think we can change that. Now, I can be reached through Kucinic.com, and through there, if there's a group of you who are interested in just getting some advice on something you're working on, I'm available to do that. Matter of fact, I love doing that, because that's the way that we keep this movement for change going in our communities. Because that's how I started as a community activist. And I have the heart and soul of a community activist. So anytime people need help on that level, it's always a great pleasure. I want to thank you for welcoming me, and I will tell you that this is already one of the best birthdays I've had. Thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you, Dennis. Thanks for being with us.